Hello, beautiful community. We are going to have to stop doing this if we're going to keep our democracies. We can't sane wash Trump. We can't have our media organizations sane washing Trump. Just over an hour ago, I've seen the most shocking sane washing of Trump by a major journalistic institution, the BBC, but many of the others have done it too. The BBC is certainly not alone, and much of their reporting here is superb. But it's the sane washing of Trump that is utterly shocking, and we're going to watch it together.
At 10, Donald Trump says he's ready to impose new sanctions on Russia after the heaviest aerial attack on Ukraine in 3 years of war.
So that's leading the news at 10 o'clock on the weekend in the UK on BBC One. Trump is, let's listen to it again, what?
Donald Trump says he's ready to impose new sanctions on Russia.
The main news story is that Trump says he is ready to impose new sanctions on Russia.
This evening, Donald Trump said he's ready to increase sanctions on Moscow. Here's Joe Inwood.
Just hours after Russia launched its biggest aerial attack of the war, this question to President Trump.
Are you ready to move to the second phase of sanctions against Russia or punishing Putin?
A suggestion that Donald Trump is finally going to make good on his threats to use economic pressure against Russia.
Watch this again.
Move to the second phase of sanctions against Russia or punishing Putin.
Watch this again.
Ready to move to the second phase of sanctions against Russia or punishing Putin.
What is he going to say? He's going to say he's not? Let's finish the report.
Against Russia or punishing Putin.
A suggestion that Donald Trump is finally going to make good on his threats.
From the correspondent, the behavior is okay because he says a suggestion that Trump will.
As Kyiv once again burns, the question is, will further sanctions be enough to force Russia to come to the negotiating table?
No, the question is, will Trump stop being pro-Russian and will he ever do anything that hurts Putin?
Donald Trump's attempts to force peace could go up in smoke. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
To other news now.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's talk about why this is so shocking and so bad. And of course, I'm exaggerating when I say, will Trump ever do anything to hurt Putin? But that's because what I mean is that the question isn't whether that's going to stop Putin, which it wouldn't. The question is Trump even going to do that? We've had months and months of Trump not being able to act against Putin, and we're likely to have a couple of years more of Trump not being able to act against Putin. That's because of his narcissistic dependence on Putin and because of his ideological brotherhood with Putin. But let's look at what's really wrong with what we've seen. We're not blaming the correspondent. And also, in between all of this, because I cut this up, there was a wonderful and long segment by the brilliant Sarah Rainsford from Kiev. So this is really excellent Ukraine coverage from the BBC. But the sane washing of Trump is horrific. In the context of a post-truth communicator like Trump, him just saying, yup, is nowhere near enough to lead the news with the statement that he's going to be imposing sanctions on Russia. That he says he's going to be imposing sanctions on Russia. Even if he is, you can't lead the news with that because it's an elementary misunderstanding, not just of Trump, you're saying washing Trump, but of the post-truth age. It shows how individual journalists and especially journalistic institutions are completely unready for this. So this creates false expectations, but much more importantly than that, it simply misrepresents the thing before our eyes. You see, if George W. Bush said that, or if Obama said that, you could plausibly lead with the idea that, they're saying that they are now open to imposing sanctions on Russia, more sanctions on Russia. There is no place on earth from which you could conclude that that applies to Trump. It doesn't mean the same thing when Trump says it, especially when he doesn't say, I'm going to do the sanctions, when he says, yeah. What was there before our eyes was a tricky question for Trump and a one-word answer from Trump. And so this is not just a sort of a misunderstanding. This is going to kill our democracies if we keep doing this. You can't report on post-truth populists as though they were Barack Obama. If you're going to do that, you're going to lose your democracy. And you know what you're going to lose as you lose your democracy? You're going to lose your own institution. Right? The BBC wants to survive. It can't behave like that. And I don't want to generalize across the whole corporation. There is no such thing as the BBC. There's different departments. They do different things. Some of them are brilliant. Some of them are useless. But cumulatively, what we need to do is to celebrate institutions and help them feel confident enough to be courageous and to aspire to where they need to go. This is defensive. And it's wildly untruthful. There's nothing factually wrong there, but it's wildly untruthful and extremely dangerous. Worse than dangerous, unsustainable, right? You keep doing that, there is no BBC and there is no democracy if you keep doing that. And we're all doing that. So if I open this page and I take a look at what else I am seeing out there, Time magazine, Trump to sanction Russia after large-scale attack. Reuters, Trump ready for phase 2 of Russia sanctions. Sky News, Trump says he is ready to move to the second stage of Russia sanctions. Independent, Trump vows to push ahead with... No, he doesn't. Not on the basis of what we've seen, at least. So you cannot sanewash post-truth populists by presenting them as though they are not post-truth populists. You can't do that. You can't do that. You will pay if you do that with institutional collapse, including the collapse of whatever institution you represent. So the correct thing, right, is either you don't report on it or you report on it by putting it into context. You say the different contradictory things Trump has said. You say the different things he said he was going to do that he didn't do. And you gesture at the weirdness of his affiliation with Putin. And this is almost unfathomable. This is going to make journalists shake with discomfort because it's so hard and difficult to do. You actually explain the kind of political animal Trump is, that he says 4 or 5 incompatible things. You're treating him like somebody who does not speak in a sort of voluminous cacophony of incompatible claims, some or all of which are false. This is difficult, but you have to get this right. Moreover, on this particular occasion, it's not even that Trump uttered a couple of sentences. He just said, yep. So it's a very disturbing normalization of Trump's abnormality when you convert that utterance, which was just defensive to cope with the public interaction on his part. He needed to say something. You convert that into the leading story of all the news stories in the world. And what's that story? That story is that Trump vows to move on with more sanctions. But that's not what happened. The only person who would think that that's what happened in that shot that we watched is a person who has no idea about the language of post-truth populists. And so we are reporting on these people as though they're doing something they're not doing, you know? And it's absolutely, absolutely bizarre. And it has to stop. You have to emphasize the nature of these politicians, and you have to emphasize how the nature of these politicians applies to particular utterances. What all the news organizations are doing now, major ones in the West, is they're detaching the nature of these people with the understanding of their utterances, right? So that you might have a picture that Trump is a post-truth politician. He says various kinds of incompatible things. But then when a particular utterance arises, you don't relate to it and relay it against that context. You just go ahead and run it as though somebody else has said it, who's quite a different operator, who does quite different things with words. You're either going to call out the lies and the post-truthing of these politicians, you're either going to interpret their behavior according to their nature, or you're going to go out of business, and you're going to send our institutions out of business. All of our institutions, not just media organizations, but also courts and parliaments. We're all doing this, and it's completely unprofessional. And the problem is you don't know where the responsibility lies. Does it lie with the individual journalist, or does it lie with the news organization? News organizations are far too scared. They are assailed, and they're far too scared to do something so bold as to interpret Trump according to his nature. But that's a self-defeating enterprise, because sometimes defensiveness sends you out of business more than boldness would. Now, I do think individual journalists need to do much more, and they need to put pressure on their journalistic institutions. But more importantly, this does need to be top-down and centralized. If you're the New York Times, if you're the BBC, if you're CNN, you have to have a policy about how to report on something like this. Otherwise, this kind of calamity happens, whereby you're starting global news with a story that doesn't just misrepresent what Trump says, but misrepresents what Trump says in a way that is a gross misrepresentation of his nature. Can't do it. Lots of love.